Madison walked through the busy streets of London with her phone in her hand and a big smile on her face. She was 22 years old and had 3 million followers on TikTok. Every day she made videos that shocked people and made them talk about her. That was how she became famous on social media. Her long blonde hair moved in the wind as she looked around for something interesting to film. Madison wore a bright pink dress and white sneakers. She always dressed in colors that would stand out in her videos. Her phone case was covered in sparkles and had a ring light attached to it. She never went anywhere without being ready to film. Madison had come to London for vacation, but she was always working. Even on vacation, she needed to make content for her followers. They expected new videos every day. If she stopped posting videos, her followers would forget about her and find someone else to watch. She had already made 3 videos that morning. One video showed her asking strangers weird questions on the street. Another video showed her pretending to be lost and asking for directions in a funny accent. The third video showed her trying to order food in a restaurant by only pointing at things. All of these videos got thousands of views within minutes of posting them. But Madison wanted something bigger, something that would get millions of views and make her even more famous. She walked past coffee shops and souvenir stores looking for the perfect opportunity. Then she saw something that made her eyes light up with excitement. Buckingham Palace stood in front of her like a giant golden castle. Tourists were everywhere taking pictures and buying postcards. But what caught Madison's attention was not the beautiful building. It was the royal guard standing perfectly still outside the palace gates. The guard was tall and wore a bright red uniform with gold buttons. His black hat was so tall it made him look even taller. He held a rifle and stared straight ahead without moving at all. He looked like a statue that someone had dressed up in fancy clothes. Madison had heard about these guards before. People said they never moved no matter what happened around them. Tourists tried to make them laugh or smile, but they always failed. The guards were trained to ignore everything and stand like statues for hours. This gave Madison the perfect idea for her next video. She would be the first person to make a royal guard break character. She would do whatever it took to make him move or speak or show any emotion. Her followers would love watching her succeed where everyone else had failed. Madison pulled out her phone and opened her camera app. She checked her makeup in the front camera and fixed her hair. Then she switched to video mode and started recording. She whispered into the camera so the guard could not hear her plan. She told her followers that she was about to do something amazing. She said she was going to make the serious royal guard laugh and smile. She promised her viewers the most entertaining video they had ever seen. Madison was confident this would be easy because she had never met anyone who could resist her charm and energy. Other tourists walked around the area taking pictures with the palace in the background. Some people were buying souvenirs from street vendors. Children were eating ice cream and pointing at the guard. Everyone seemed impressed by how still he could stand. Madison looked at the guard one more time before starting her plan. He was probably in his 30s with a serious face. His uniform was perfectly clean and pressed. His boots were so shiny they reflected the sunlight. Everything about him showed discipline and training. She had no idea that this guard was different from what she expected. She thought he was just there for decoration like a fancy ornament. Madison had no respect for his job or the important role he played. She only saw him as a prop for her video. Madison took a deep breath and started walking toward the guard with her camera recording. She was ready to create the viral video that would make her the most famous TikTok star in the world. Madison walked up to the royal guard with her phone held high in front of her face. The camera was recording everything as she got closer and closer to him. She made sure the phone captured both her face and the guard in the same shot. This was going to be the perfect video for her 3 million followers. The guard stood like a stone statue. His name was James, but Madison did not know this. She did not care about his name or anything about him as a person. To her, he was just content for her social media account. James had been standing in the same position for 2 hours already. His training had taught him to ignore all distractions and focus on his duty. Madison started with simple tricks that had worked on other people before. She waved her hands in front of his face like she was trying to hypnotize him. She moved her hands left and right, and up and down, but James did not move his eyes to follow them. His gaze stayed fixed straight ahead, like he was looking at something very important in the distance. She made loud noises next to his ears. Madison clapped her hands and snapped her fingers. She even tried making animal sounds like a monkey and a chicken. The other tourists started to notice what she was doing. Some of them stopped taking their own pictures to watch her strange behavior. James could hear everything Madison was doing, but his training was stronger than his curiosity. He had learned to block out all sounds and movements that were not related to his job. During his military training, he had practiced ignoring much worse distractions than one silly girl with a phone. Madison laughed into her camera and spoke to her followers like they were her best friends. She told them this was going to be easier than she thought. She said the guard was probably scared of her because she was so bold and confident. Her voice got louder as she became more excited about her plan. She started dancing around James like he was a maypole. Madison did popular TikTok dances that her followers would recognize. She did the floss dance and the whip and na-na. She even tried some dance moves from old videos that had made her famous. Her pink dress spun around as she moved in circles around the motionless guard. Other tourists began pulling out their own phones to record what was happening. Some people looked amused by her dancing. Others looked confused about why she was bothering the guard. A few people seemed annoyed that she was making such a scene in front of an important historical place. Madison then tried singing popular songs that were trending on social media. She sang off-key on purpose to make her video funnier. She sang Baby Shark and some rap songs with silly lyrics. She even made up her own song about the guard being too serious and needing to smile more. James had dealt with many tourists during his 5 years as a royal guard. He had seen people try to make him laugh before. Children often made funny faces at him. Adults sometimes told jokes or did silly dances, but most people were respectful and took their pictures quickly before moving on. Madison was different from the normal tourists. She seemed determined to stay until she got the reaction she wanted. James could sense that this girl was not going to give up easily. Her behavior felt more aggressive and disrespectful than what he usually experienced. Madison tried to take selfies by holding her phone up and getting both her face and the guard's face in the picture. She made different expressions for each photo. She smiled big and made peace signs with her fingers. She stuck out her tongue and made funny faces. She even tried to put her arm around James like they were old friends. The crowd of watching tourists was getting bigger and bigger. Madison loved having an audience for her performance. Madison realized that her dancing and singing were not working. The guard still stood like a statue without showing any emotion. She felt frustrated because her usual tricks always worked on other people, but she was not ready to give up. She needed this video to go viral, and she would do whatever it took to make that happen. She decided to get more aggressive with her approach. Madison reached out and touched the guard's red uniform jacket. She felt the thick fabric and the gold buttons while her camera kept recording. James felt her touching his uniform, but his training told him to stay still. He had been taught that tourists sometimes accidentally bumped into guards, and he should not react unless there was real danger. Madison got bolder and tried to adjust his tall black hat. She stood on her tiptoes and reached up toward his head. James was much taller than her, so she could barely reach the bottom of his hat. She pulled at it gently, trying to make it crooked or make it fall off his head. The hat was secured tightly and did not move. The crowd of tourists watching her grew larger. Some people started whispering to each other about her behavior. A woman with gray hair shook her head and said Madison should show more respect. An older man told his wife that young people today had no manners. But Madison ignored all the negative comments from the crowd. She spoke loudly to her camera and made sure everyone could hear her. Madison called the guard names like boring and lifeless. She said he was probably just a regular person dressed up in a costume. She told her followers that these guards were not real soldiers and were just there to look pretty for tourists. Madison made up stories about James to entertain her viewers. She said he was probably afraid of her because she was so confident and bold. She claimed he was too shy to talk to a pretty girl like her. She even said he was probably jealous of her success on social media. She pulled out her phone charger from her purse and tried to make James hold it like he was posing for a photo. She wrapped the cord around his arm and tried to make him look like he was using technology. Madison thought this would be funny because the guard looked so old-fashioned in his traditional uniform. A family with young children walked by, and the mother quickly moved her kids away from Madison. She did not want her children to see this kind of disrespectful behavior. Several other tourists started taking pictures of Madison instead of the guard. They seemed more interested in her strange actions than in the historical ceremony. Madison noticed she was getting attention from the crowd, and this made her even more excited. She loved being the center of attention, even if people were looking at her for negative reasons. She told her camera that all these people were just jealous because they did not have the courage to do what she was doing. She tried to hand James her phone and asked him to take a picture of her. She posed in front of the palace and waited for him to lift the phone. When he did not move, she laughed and said he must not know how to use modern technology. Madison made jokes about him being stuck in the past. James had been a royal guard for 5 years and had never encountered someone so persistent and disrespectful. Most tourists tried one or two things to get his attention and then moved on when they realized he would not react. But Madison seemed determined to keep trying until she got some kind of response from him. The other guards nearby could see what was happening, but they also had to stay in position. They trusted that James could handle the situation professionally. Madison was getting more frustrated as her attempts continued to fail. She had been trying to get a reaction from the guard for 20 minutes and nothing was working. Her followers expected her to succeed, and she could not disappoint them. She decided it was time to try much more aggressive tactics. She started making personal attacks about the guard's appearance. Madison commented on his serious facial expression and said he looked angry and mean. She made fun of his perfectly styled hair under his hat. She even made jokes about his height and said he was trying too hard to look important. Madison pulled a small bag from her purse that was filled with props she used in her videos. She always carried silly items that could make her content more entertaining. The first thing she pulled out was a fake mustache with sticky backing. She tried to stick it on the guard's upper lip while her camera recorded everything. James felt the sticky mustache being pressed against his face, but he did not move or react. His military training had prepared him for much worse situations than this. He had learned to endure discomfort and distractions while maintaining his position and focus. Next, Madison pulled out a rubber chicken from her bag. It was bright yellow and made squeaking sounds when she squeezed it. She waved the rubber chicken around James' head like it was flying. She made airplane noises and pretended the chicken was trying to land on his hat. The squeaking sounds were loud and annoying. The crowd of tourists was now clearly upset with Madison's behavior. A man in a business suit told her to stop and show some respect. A woman with her teenage daughter said Madison was being rude and embarrassing. Several people were taking videos of Madison, not to support her, but to show others how badly she was behaving. Madison just laughed at all the criticism from the crowd. She told her camera that these people did not understand how social media worked. She said they were old-fashioned and did not know how to have fun. Madison claimed she was just trying to make the guard smile, and there was nothing wrong with that. She began pushing James gently with her shoulder to see if she could make him lose his balance. Madison pushed from different angles, trying to find a way to make him step forward or backward. James felt the pressure, but his strong stance and training kept him perfectly stable. His boots were planted firmly on the ground. Madison tried to get between James and the tourists who were taking pictures. She wanted to block their view so they would have to pay attention to her instead. She jumped up and down in front of him, waving her arms, trying to ruin other people's photos of the guard. A police officer who was patrolling the area noticed the commotion and started walking toward the crowd. He could see that one person was causing problems and disturbing the peace. The officer wanted to make sure the situation did not get out of control. Madison saw the police officer approaching, but she was not worried. She thought she was just having harmless fun, and no one could arrest her for making videos. She continued her performance, and even waved at the officer like he was part of her show. She pulled out a small mirror from her purse and tried to reflect sunlight into the guard's eyes. Madison angled the mirror different ways, trying to create a bright flash that would make him blink or turn his head. The reflected light was annoying, but James kept his eyes fixed straight ahead. The other royal guards standing at different positions around the palace could see what was happening to James. They felt proud of how professionally he was handling the difficult situation. They knew that maintaining discipline under pressure was one of the most important parts of their job. Madison was running out of ideas and starting to feel desperate. She had promised her followers that she would be the first person to make a royal guard break character. Her reputation as a successful influencer depended on following through with her promises. She could not admit failure in front of 3 million people. She decided to try one final aggressive approach that would surely get some kind of reaction. Madison was about to try her most extreme tactic when something completely unexpected happened. She had raised her hand to tap the guard on his chest when he did something that shocked everyone watching. Instead of continuing to ignore her, James began to speak. His voice was calm and clear like a news reporter on television. James did not move his body at all, and his facial expression stayed exactly the same. He continued staring straight ahead, but his words were directed at Madison and everyone else who was listening. The first thing James said was simple but powerful. He told Madison that he could see and hear everything she had been doing for the past 30 minutes. He explained that royal guards were not deaf or blind statues, but highly trained soldiers who chose not to react to distractions. Madison stopped moving and stared at him with her mouth open. She had never expected the guard to actually speak to her. In all the videos she had watched online, the guards never said anything, no matter what people did to them. She thought they were not allowed to talk while on duty. The crowd of tourists became completely silent. Even the children stopped making noise and listened carefully to what the guard was saying. People who had been walking by stopped to hear his words. Everyone was surprised that he was speaking while still maintaining his professional posture. James continued talking in his steady voice. He told Madison that her behavior was being recorded by security cameras around the palace. He said that everything she had done would be reviewed by his commanding officers. He explained that bothering a royal guard was taken very seriously by the British military. Madison felt nervous for the first time since she had started her video. She had not thought about security cameras or getting in trouble with the military. She had only been thinking about getting views and likes on her social media account. The possibility of real consequences had never crossed her mind. The guard explained that he had been watching Madison approach other tourists earlier that day. He said he had seen her making videos where she bothered strangers and made them uncomfortable. James told her that he had been preparing for her arrival because other guards had warned him about her behavior. This revelation shocked Madison even more. She realized that the guards communicated with each other and shared information about problematic tourists. She had thought each guard was completely isolated and unaware of what happened to the others. Her plan had been much more obvious than she realized. James' voice remained calm, but his words carried serious authority. He told Madison that royal guards were not entertainment for social media videos. He explained that they had an important job protecting the royal family and maintaining security around the palace. He said that treating them like props for videos was disrespectful and inappropriate. The police officer who had been walking toward the crowd arrived just as James was speaking. The officer listened carefully to what the guard was saying. He could see that James was handling the situation professionally and did not need assistance yet, but the officer stayed nearby in case the situation got worse. Madison tried to interrupt James and get control of the situation back. She wanted to explain to her camera that this was all part of her plan. She tried to tell her followers that she had always known the guard would eventually speak to her. But every time she started talking, the crowd would tell her to be quiet. The tourists wanted to hear what James had to say. They were more interested in his words than in Madison's excuses. For the first time since she had started making videos, Madison found herself being ignored while someone else became the center of attention. James continued speaking and began to share information that would completely change how everyone viewed the situation. He was about to reveal details about his background that would make Madison realize she had made a terrible mistake. The crowd leaned in closer to hear his next words. Madison held her phone with shaking hands as she realized her viral video was not going the way she had planned. James began to share details about his life that made everyone in the crowd listen with deep respect. He told them that before becoming a Royal Guard, he had served as a soldier in the British Army for 8 years. His voice remained steady and professional as he described his military experience. He explained that he had been deployed to Afghanistan 3 different times during his military career. Each deployment lasted 6 months, and he had faced dangerous combat situations. James described how he and his fellow soldiers had protected civilians and worked to bring peace to areas affected by war. Madison felt smaller and smaller as she listened to his words. She had called him names and said he was not a real soldier. Now she was learning that he had risked his life serving his country in one of the most dangerous places in the world. Her face turned red with embarrassment. James continued by telling the crowd about the medals he had earned during his military service. He had received a medal for bravery after he rescued 2 injured soldiers during a bombing attack. He had also earned medals for his leadership and for completing difficult missions successfully. The crowd was amazed by what they were hearing. Many people had never met a real war hero before. They looked at James with new respect and admiration. Some people in the crowd had tears in their eyes as they listened to his stories of courage and sacrifice. James explained that becoming a Royal Guard was one of the highest honors a British soldier could achieve. He said that only the best soldiers were chosen for this special duty. The selection process was very difficult and required years of perfect military service and training. He described the intense training that Royal Guards went through before they could stand outside the palace. They had to learn to stand perfectly still for hours without moving. They practiced ignoring all kinds of distractions, including loud noises, bright lights, and people trying to make them react. Madison realized that everything she had done to try to distract James was something he had trained specifically to ignore. She had thought she was being creative and original, but he had faced much worse challenges during his military training. Her silly props and dancing looked foolish compared to his professional preparation. James told the crowd about the important responsibility that came with being a Royal Guard. He explained that they were not just standing there for decoration or for tourists to photograph. They were actually protecting the royal family and other important people who lived and worked in the palace. He described how Royal Guards worked together as a team to watch for any signs of danger. They communicated with each other using subtle signals that tourists could not see. Every guard was trained to notice suspicious behavior and respond quickly if there was a real threat. The crowd learned that Royal Guards were armed and ready to defend the palace if necessary. James explained that their rifles were not just for show, but were real weapons that they knew how to use. He said that their serious expressions and still postures were signs of their readiness to protect others. Madison had never thought about the guards as real protectors. She had only seen them as interesting objects for her social media content. Learning about their true purpose made her realize how disrespectful her behavior had been. James spoke about the history and tradition of the Royal Guard. He explained that soldiers had been protecting British royalty for hundreds of years. The red uniforms and tall hats were symbols of honor and service that connected him to generations of brave soldiers who had served before him. He told the crowd that when tourists visited the palace and saw the Royal Guards, they were seeing living representatives of British military history. Each guard carried on traditions of courage, discipline, and dedication that had been passed down through centuries. The police officer who was listening nodded his head in approval of how James was handling the situation. The officer could see that the guard was educating people rather than just complaining about Madison's behavior. Madison felt ashamed as she realized how much she had misunderstood about the person she had been harassing. As James continued speaking, the crowd around Madison began to change completely. The people who had been watching her silly performance now turned their full attention to the royal guard. They were fascinated by his stories and impressed by his knowledge. Madison found herself being ignored by the very audience she had been trying to entertain. An elderly man in the crowd raised his hand and asked James a question about his time in Afghanistan. The man said his own son had served in the military, and he wanted to know what it was really like for soldiers overseas. James answered the question with respect and detail, sharing appropriate stories about his experiences. A woman asked James about the daily life of a royal guard. She wanted to know how long they stood in one position and how they prepared for their duties. James explained their schedule and training routine. He described how guards rotated positions every few hours and how they maintained their physical fitness. Madison tried to interrupt the conversation and bring attention back to herself. She spoke loudly and waved her phone, trying to remind people that she was still recording. But the crowd completely ignored her. Several people actually told her to be quiet because they wanted to listen to James. A young boy asked James about his uniform and weapons. The child was curious about the tall hat and the shiny buttons. James patiently explained the history and meaning of each part of his uniform. He told the boy about the importance of keeping everything clean and properly maintained. Madison felt frustrated and confused. This was not how her videos usually went. Normally, people paid attention to her and laughed at her jokes. She was used to being the most interesting person in any situation. But now everyone was treating James like a celebrity while treating her like an annoying distraction. More people kept joining the crowd as word spread that one of the royal guards was actually talking and answering questions. Tourists hurried over from other parts of the palace grounds. Some people called their friends and family members to come listen to the rare opportunity to learn from a real guard. Madison watched as people took pictures with James in the background, but they were not trying to pose with him or make him break character. Instead, they were taking respectful photos while he continued his educational presentation. The pictures showed people listening and learning rather than trying to cause trouble. A teacher who was visiting with a school group asked if her students could ask James some questions for their history project. James agreed and spent several minutes talking to the children about British military traditions and the importance of public service. The children listened carefully and took notes. Madison realized that James was giving the crowd exactly what they wanted. People were more interested in learning real information than in watching someone try to cause problems. Her style of entertainment suddenly seemed childish and pointless compared to his meaningful conversation. She tried a few more times to get attention by making loud noises and doing silly dances, but each time she tried to interrupt, the crowd would shush her or ask her to move away. People were genuinely annoyed that she was disturbing their chance to learn from James. A news reporter who happened to be in the area noticed the large crowd and came over to investigate. The reporter began interviewing people in the crowd about what was happening. Everyone talked about how impressed they were with the royal guard's knowledge and professionalism. No one mentioned Madison or her video. Madison overheard people in the crowd talking about her behavior. They described her as rude and disrespectful. Some people said they felt embarrassed for her. Others said they thought she needed to learn better manners. Madison had never heard people criticize her so directly before. The police officer approached Madison and quietly suggested that she should move along and stop disturbing the educational discussion. He was polite but firm in his request. Madison realized that even the authorities saw her as the problem in this situation. For the first time in her social media career, Madison found herself in a situation where her usual tactics were not working. She had always been able to control the narrative and make herself the center of attention. But James had completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Madison looked down at her phone and saw that she had been recording for over an hour. She had enough footage for a video, but it was not the kind of content she had planned to create. After answering questions from the crowd for several minutes, James did something that surprised everyone, including Madison. He turned his attention directly toward her and began speaking to her personally. His voice was not angry or harsh, but it carried the gentle authority of a teacher talking to a student who needed guidance. James told Madison that he had been watching her behavior not just today, but through reports from other guards around London. He said that royal guards communicated with each other about tourists who caused problems. He explained that her reputation for bothering people had reached them before she even arrived at the palace. Madison felt her cheeks turn red as she realized that her behavior was well known among the very people she had been trying to embarrass. She had thought she was being clever and original, but James was telling her that they had been prepared for exactly the kind of disruption she would cause. James began to speak about respect and how important it was in all human interactions. He explained that every person deserved to be treated with dignity regardless of their job or position in life. He told Madison that the way she treated others reflected who she was as a person more than it said anything about them. He described how her behavior was disrespectful not just to him personally, but to all the soldiers who had served and died protecting the freedoms that allowed her to make her videos. James explained that her right to create content and express herself came from the sacrifices that military members had made throughout history. Madison had never thought about the connection between her freedom to make videos and the service of soldiers like James. She realized that she had been taking her privileges for granted, while showing no appreciation for the people who had protected those privileges. James talked about the importance of understanding the difference between confidence and arrogance. He said that true confidence came from respecting others and knowing your own worth without needing to put other people down. He explained that arrogance was trying to make yourself look good by making others look bad. The crowd listened quietly as James continued his gentle but powerful lesson. Several people were wiping tears from their eyes as they heard his wise words. Madison found herself actually listening carefully for the first time in years as someone explained how her actions affected other people. James spoke about the responsibility that came with having influence over other people. He told Madison that her 3 million followers were watching everything she did and learning from her example. He asked her to think about what kind of behavior she was teaching them and whether she was proud of the lessons she was giving. This hit Madison harder than anything else James had said. She had always thought about her followers as numbers that made her money and fame. She had never considered that real people were copying her behavior and treating others the way she did in her videos. James explained that with great influence came great responsibility. He said that people with large audiences had a duty to use their platform to make the world better rather than to cause problems or hurt feelings. He told Madison that she had the power to inspire positive change if she chose to use it wisely. He talked about the importance of treating everyone with kindness regardless of whether they could help your career or make you famous. James said that how you treated people who could not do anything for you showed your true character. He explained that real strength came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Madison realized that she had been using her influence in exactly the wrong way. Instead of inspiring her followers to be kind and respectful, she had been teaching them that it was acceptable to bother and embarrass other people for entertainment. James spoke about forgiveness and second chances. He told Madison that everyone made mistakes and that the important thing was learning from those mistakes and choosing to do better in the future. He said that he did not hold her behavior against her personally, but hoped she would think about changing her approach. The wisdom in James' words reached something deep inside Madison that had been buried under years of seeking attention and fame. She began to understand that there were more important things in life than getting views and likes on social media. James finished his lesson by telling Madison that he believed she had the potential to use her influence for good. He said that if she chose to change her behavior, she could become someone who inspired others to be respectful and kind, rather than someone who taught them to be selfish and rude. Madison stood quietly holding her phone as James' words sank into her heart and mind. Madison stood in silence for several long moments after James finished speaking. The crowd waited quietly to see how she would respond to his powerful words. For the first time in her adult life, Madison felt truly ashamed of her behavior. She could see herself clearly through the eyes of others, and she did not like what she saw. Slowly, Madison reached up and turned off her phone camera. The red recording light disappeared, and she lowered the device to her side. This simple action spoke louder than any words she could have said. The crowd recognized that something important was happening inside her mind and heart. Madison looked directly at James and spoke in a quiet voice that was very different from her usual loud performance style. She told him that she was sorry for everything she had done. She said that she had never thought about how her behavior affected other people. Madison admitted that she had been selfish and disrespectful. She apologized not just to James but to everyone in the crowd who had witnessed her inappropriate behavior. Madison said she was embarrassed by her actions and wished she could take them back. She thanked James for taking the time to educate her instead of simply having her removed by security. James accepted her apology with the same dignity he had shown throughout the entire encounter. He told Madison that apologizing was the first step toward becoming a better person. He said that he respected her willingness to admit her mistakes and hoped she would learn from this experience. Madison asked James if she could shake his hand to thank him for his service to their country. James smiled slightly, which was the first time his serious expression had changed all day. He briefly stepped out of his formal position to shake her hand respectfully. The crowd applauded this moment of mutual respect and understanding. After shaking hands with James, Madison turned to address the crowd of tourists who had watched everything unfold. She spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear her apology. Madison said she was sorry for disrupting their visit to this important historical place. She promised to behave better in the future. Several people in the crowd nodded their heads in approval of her apology. The elderly man who had asked James questions told Madison that everyone makes mistakes and that admitting them takes courage. A woman said she was proud of Madison for choosing to change her behavior. Madison walked away from the palace grounds feeling completely different than when she had arrived. She spent the rest of her day in London thinking about everything James had taught her. She realized that she had been living her life in a way that hurt other people and made the world a little bit worse instead of better. That evening, Madison sat in her hotel room and did something she had never done before. Instead of editing her footage to make herself look good, she decided to post the entire encounter exactly as it had happened. She wanted her followers to see her mistakes and learn from them. Madison wrote a long caption explaining how wrong she had been and how much she had learned from James. She thanked him publicly for his patience and wisdom. She encouraged her followers to treat everyone with respect and to think about how their actions affected other people. The video of Madison's encounter with James went viral just as she had hoped it would, but it became famous for completely different reasons than she had planned. People shared the video because they were impressed by James' professionalism and wisdom. They also shared it because they respected Madison's courage in admitting her mistakes. Comments on the video praised James for his dignified response and thanked him for his military service. Many people also complimented Madison for her sincere apology and her willingness to change. The video became an example of how people could learn from their mistakes and become better. Madison began creating different types of content that focused on spreading kindness and respect. She used her platform to highlight the good work that people like James were doing in their communities. Her follower count actually grew as people appreciated her more positive message. Months later, Madison returned to London and visited Buckingham Palace again. She brought flowers to leave at a memorial for fallen soldiers. When she saw James on duty, she simply nodded respectfully from a distance. He nodded back, acknowledging their shared understanding. Madison had learned that true influence came not from shocking people or causing problems, but from inspiring them to be their best selves. James had taught her that real strength was shown through wisdom, respect, and service to others. This lesson changed not only her social media career, but her entire approach to life.